The night it all began wasn't one I had planned to spend out. Honestly, I was supposed to be at home, buried under a pile of paperwork for the promotion I'd been working my tail off to get. Meanwhile, my wife, Amy, was out with her friends. Or at least, that's what I thought. But as fate would have it, a last-minute work meeting dragged me to this dimly lit, overpriced bar downtown. A couple of big shots were celebrating some deal I couldn't care less about, so there I was, nursing a drink and counting down the minutes till I could leave. And then I saw her. At first, I wasn't even sure it was Amy. She didn't notice me. She was far too busy with the guy she was cozied up to, laughing like she hadn't laughed in years. Her whole body seemed alive, leaning into him, her hand lightly grazing his arm, a flirtatious smile playing on her lips. My brain tried to convince me it was someone else, just a random woman who happened to look like her. But then she tilted her face into the light, leaning in close to whisper something to him, her lips brushing his neck. It was Amy. No doubt about it. For a moment, I just stood there, completely numb, like my brain had short-circuited. I was holding on to a letter I'd signed that night for a new client, a contract that was supposed to seal my promotion. But right then, none of it mattered. My wife was there, so close to that man she could feel his breath, running her fingers over his shoulder like it was second nature. The bartender gave me a sideways glance as I set the letter down on the counter, my hands trembling. A deep, pulsing anger started building in my chest, an anger I couldn't remember feeling in years, if ever. It felt like I'd stumbled into some nightmare version of my life, where everything I thought I knew had been flipped upside down. I wanted to walk away, to leave her there in her little bubble of lies and betrayal. But my legs wouldn't move. Some part of me needed to burn that image into my memory, like if I stared long enough, she'd sense my presence and be forced to face what she'd done. But she didn't. She didn't even glance in my direction. That's when it hit me. Amy had erased me the moment she walked through that door. I left the bar after that, my head spinning. Somehow, I ended up back at home, sitting in the dark living room, replaying everything I'd just seen over and over. The clock dragged past midnight, then 1, then 2 in the morning. Amy wasn't even pretending to come home early anymore. I thought about calling her but stopped myself. What was I going to say? Ask her if she had fun with the girls? Around 3, I finally heard her at the door. She was fumbling with her keys, laughing softly like she didn't have a care in the world. When she walked in and saw me sitting there, her face twisted from surprise to annoyance, like I was the one inconveniencing her. "What are you doing up?" she asked, slipping off her heels with an exaggerated sigh. Her lipstick was smudged, and her hair was a mess, like she hadn't even thought about how she looked walking into her own home. I forced myself to stay calm. "Funny, I was about to ask you the same thing," I said, my voice tight. "You were out with friends, huh?" Her expression turned sharp, her eyes narrowing. "I told you I was with Sarah and the girls," she said, her tone dripping with contempt. "What's with the interrogation?" The sheer nerve of her made my pulse race. I steadied myself, taking a deep breath. "Yeah, with Sarah, right? Over by 5th and Lexington?" For just a second, she hesitated. It was barely noticeable, but I caught it. She quickly tried to recover, smirking. "What, were you spying on me or something?" "Spying?" I could feel the heat rising in my chest. "Is that really the story you're going with? Because I happened to be there tonight, Amy, and I didn't see Sarah or any of your so-called friends. But I did see you." Her face froze for half a second, and she looked cornered. But just as quickly, she rolled her eyes and waved me off like I was being ridiculous. "You know what? You're acting crazy," she said, her voice sharp. "I don't have to explain every little detail of my night to you, Tom. You're seriously flipping out over something you think you saw?" Her words stung, but more than that, the cold, almost mocking expression on her face gutted me. It was like I didn't even recognize her anymore. "So, it was nothing?" I asked, my voice low, trying to hold back the anger that threatened to spill over. "Innocent, huh?" I said, my voice trembling just enough to betray how much her words rattled me. "An innocent night out with your friend? Amy, I saw you." I saw the way you were with him. Don't stand there and act like I'm imagining things. She shrugged, her face maddeningly calm, as if this was just another minor inconvenience to brush off. Maybe I had a few drinks, okay? Maybe I got a little too friendly with someone. But are you really going to blow this out of proportion over one little moment? Are you really that insecure? That word, insecure, hit me like a gut punch. She wasn't just deflecting, she was twisting the knife, framing this whole thing as if I was the problem. Like it was all in my head, some figment of my overactive imagination. But I knew what I saw, and no amount of her calm, dismissive demeanor could change that. She stood there, daring me to push further, throwing out excuse after excuse to avoid the truth. It felt like someone I trusted completely had just shoved me off a cliff, leaving me scrambling for any sense of footing. I didn't know whether to laugh at the absurdity of it all or scream at the arrogance she had to stand there spinning her lies like it was no big deal. Insecure? I repeated, barely able to keep my voice steady. You think this is about me being insecure? Amy sighed loudly, crossing her arms and rolling her eyes like I was wasting her time. Yes, Tom, I do. You're making this into a huge deal over nothing. I can't even go out with friends without you acting like I've committed some kind of crime. Do you even hear how controlling that sounds? Controlling? I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. The word tasted bitter, like it wasn't even mine to say. Amy, you didn't just go out with friends. I saw you tonight. I saw you with that guy, and it sure as hell didn't look like just friends. So let's skip the act, all right? I'm giving you one chance, just one, to come clean. Her expression shifted slightly. For a brief moment, she narrowed her eyes like she was sizing me up, trying to decide her next move. Then she tilted her head, wearing this infuriatingly calm smirk. Okay, Tom, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. If you're so sure of yourself, then why don't you tell me exactly what you think you saw? I stepped closer, my voice dropping low. I saw you leaning into him, Amy. Your hand was all over his arm. I saw your lips on his neck. Don't stand there and pretend like it didn't happen. For just a second, her face faltered. There it was, a flicker of surprise, maybe even fear, but it vanished just as quickly as it appeared. In an instant, her face turned cold, smug even. Maybe I had too much to drink, she said, shrugging nonchalantly. Maybe I was just having a little fun. You know, something you clearly don't understand anymore. My fists clenched at my sides as her words settled in. Having fun? I repeated, my voice taut with restraint. That's what you're calling it. She didn't flinch. You think you've got it all figured out, don't you? Just because you saw a single moment, one thing out of context, you think you know everything. But you don't, Tom. You don't know a damn thing. Her voice sharpened, each word biting into me like a blade. And maybe if you paid a little more attention to me, you'd understand why I needed to actually enjoy myself for once. Her words stunned me. I'd expected denials, excuses, hell, maybe even a tear or two. But this? She was turning it all around on me, making it seem like her betrayal was somehow my fault. Like I'd pushed her into his arms. Enjoy yourself? I said, the words heavy in my throat. Is that what you've been doing these past few months? All those nights you said you were out with friends, Amy, I trusted you. And now you're standing here, telling me this is my fault? That I drove you to cheat? Amy lifted her chin defiantly, her eyes flashing with something like triumph. Cheat? She scoffed, her tone dripping with mockery. You're acting like I've been having some long-term affair. Get a grip, Tom. You're seeing what you want to see. Maybe I'm just tired of living in a cage, with every move I make under your microscope. Maybe, for once, I wanted to feel alive. That word, alive, came out with this sharp edge, like she was proud of herself for saying it. Her smirk told me she wanted me to lose my cool, to give her an excuse to twist this back on me. So that's your story? I said, my voice shaking now. You're not even going to pretend to be sorry? Her gaze was cold and unyielding. Sorry for what, Tom? She shot back. For living my life? For wanting something more than this, Routine? Her words cut deeper than I could have imagined. She didn't just betray me, she was standing here, staring me down with no remorse, no guilt, nothing but a wall of indifference. In that moment, I realized I wasn't arguing with the woman I thought I knew. This was someone else entirely, someone I couldn't recognize. The silence between us felt suffocating, pressing down on me like a weight I couldn't escape. She leaned casually against the doorframe, her calm demeanor a sharp contrast to the storm brewing in my chest. It was like she'd already washed her hands of everything we built together. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay steady. So that's it? I asked, the words tasting bitter. You're telling me that months of sneaking around and lying to my face is just you enjoying yourself? Nothing more? Amy tilted her head, her eyes glinting with something I couldn't quite define, arrogance, maybe even a flicker of satisfaction. It was as if watching me unravel brought her some kind of twisted enjoyment. If you want to believe this is some sordid affair, go ahead, she said, her tone maddeningly casual. But sometimes people just need more than the dull routine of marriage, Tom. And if that's a problem for you, maybe you should ask yourself why. She said it like it was nothing, like she was talking about a minor inconvenience instead of tearing apart everything we built. Her words hit me like a freight train. Not only was she excusing what she'd done, but she was spinning it back on me, like I was blind to her needs, like it was somehow my fault she made these choices. The sheer defiance in her voice made me feel like I was the one being accused, the one on trial. You're unbelievable, I said, barely keeping my voice steady. You couldn't even have the decency to talk to me if you were this unhappy? Instead, you go out and throw everything we've built away. For what? For some stranger? For a cheap thrill? Her expression hardened into a sneer, her voice laced with sarcasm. Oh, please, Tom. Spare me the lecture about what we've built. Maybe if you actually paid attention, you'd realize things haven't exactly been perfect for a while now. Or did you just assume I'd stick around forever, no matter how empty this all got? I blinked, stunned by her audacity. Empty? I said, my voice hollow. That's what you think of our life together. Empty? Amy didn't flinch, didn't so much as hesitate. I think it's become a habit, she said coldly. Like going to work, brushing your teeth, folding laundry. It's just part of your routine, and you expect me to fit neatly into it. Well, maybe that's not enough for me anymore. Maybe I want something more. A little passion. Something that doesn't feel like checking a box every night. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles turning white as I fought to hold back the anger building inside me. So what? I asked, my voice tight. You've been faking it this whole time? Pretending everything was fine while you were out looking for an escape? She shrugged like it was no big deal. I'm saying I've been playing the role you wanted me to play, the supportive wife, the perfect partner. But it's exhausting, Tom. I'm done pretending. Every word felt like another nail in the coffin of what I thought we had. I couldn't look at her without feeling the weight of her betrayal. But worse than that was the sickening realization that she'd been carrying this resentment for God knows how long. I stepped back, feeling like the ground was shifting under my feet. If you're so done pretending, Amy, then why are you still here? I asked, my voice unsteady. Why not leave? Why not end this instead of turning me into a fool? She raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into a smirk that chilled me to the bone. Because it's not that simple, Tom. Divorce is messy, splitting everything, dealing with lawyers, the whole ordeal. And besides, you've made it pretty convenient for me. A nice house, stability, everything set up just right. Why would I throw that away? She paused, her voice dropping to a near whisper, her eyes narrowing. And anyway, I never planned to get caught. Her words crushed me. She hadn't even considered ending things. She'd planned to keep lying, to keep using me as her safety net while living her double life in secret. In that moment, it all became clear, how deeply she'd underestimated me, how confident she was that I'd just turned a blind eye. But she'd made one critical miscalculation. Her arrogance blinded her to the truth. I wasn't going to play along. Her last words echoed in my mind, each syllable twisting like a knife. she never planned to stop. She thought I'd stay locked in my role as the loyal, oblivious husband while she did whatever she wanted. And the worst part? She didn't feel even an ounce of remorse. I steadied myself, a strange calm washing over me. So let me get this straight, Amy, I said, my voice dangerously level. You're willing to keep lying to my face, keep using me, because it's convenient for you? She shrugged, utterly indifferent. Why are you acting so shocked, Tom? This isn't the 1950s. People get bored. They need more than one person to feel alive. I didn't sign up to spend my life as some housewife stuck in the suburbs, chained to a routine. My jaw clenched. You think I'm the one chaining you here? She scoffed, her expression almost amused. You're acting like you don't get it, but I think you do, Tom. I think you've been half checked out for years. And maybe if you were honest with yourself, you'd realize you're just as bored as I am. So why not accept this for what it is? We've got a good setup here. Maybe if you stopped acting like I've betrayed you, we could both get what we want. Her words landed with a sickening finality. She wasn't just admitting to her betrayal, she was proposing that I go along with it. Like this was some twisted business deal where we'd both turn a blind eye and carry on as if nothing was wrong. To her, our marriage wasn't a partnership of love or trust. It was a convenience, a contract. And she didn't seem to care about anything beyond that. So this is what you want, huh? I said, shaking my head, barely able to keep my voice steady. A marriage where we both pretend everything's fine. You do whatever you want, I look the other way, and we just play house together? Amy's eyes lit up with a smugness that twisted my stomach. Exactly, she said smoothly. You keep the image, I get my freedom, and we both stay comfortable. Think about it, Tom. No messy divorce, no lonely nights. You can keep working, chasing your promotions, being the perfect husband. I won't interfere with any of it. For a moment, I couldn't even recognize her. This wasn't the woman I'd built a life with, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone. Her cold, calculated proposal knocked the wind out of me. She didn't want a marriage, she wanted a front. And worse, she thought I'd actually go along with it. You really think that's what I want? I asked, my voice low and sharp. To be some background character in your life? To help you cover for your double life while pretending everything is fine? To live a lie just because it's convenient? Amy tilted her head, her expression somewhere between pity and disdain. Tom, you can act all outraged if you want, but this is practical. It works for both of us. We get stability, and no one has to get hurt. Hurt? I repeated, laughing bitterly, the sound hollow in the stillness of the room. Amy, do you even realize how much damage you've already done? How much you've already hurt me? Her face remained stone cold, utterly unmoved. I'm giving you a way to keep your life intact, Tom, she said matter-of-factly, as if this were some sort of business negotiation. You don't have to throw everything away over something so insignificant. Her words left me speechless. The sheer coldness of it, the total absence of remorse, it was staggering. To her, this wasn't about love or betrayal, it was just another transaction. She genuinely believed she was doing me a favor, offering me a chance to sweep her betrayal under the rug so we could both stay comfortable. But she'd underestimated me. She thought I'd let her control the narrative, but she was wrong. Her words echoed in my head, over and over. She never planned to stop. She thought I'd never catch her. And even now, standing here exposed, she wasn't sorry. She didn't even see why she should be. In that moment, I felt something inside me shift. Whatever love, loyalty, or hope I'd been holding on to dissolved. If this was who she really was, cold, detached, and unapologetic, then whatever we'd once had was already gone. She'd destroyed it. I took a step back, needing to put some distance between us, needing air like I'd been suffocating for hours. So that's your big solution? I asked, my voice eerily calm. You get your freedom, and I get to stay in the dark, playing the obedient puppet husband? Amy shrugged, her expression dismissive. Think about it logically, Tom. Why would you throw everything away? We have a life most people would kill for, A nice house, stability. You're getting promoted. Work's going great for you. Why ruin it over something that doesn't have to matter? Doesn't have to matter? I repeated, incredulous. Amy, how can this not matter? How can you stand here and look at everything we've built, everything we've shared, and think you can just replace it with some hollow, empty arrangement? Her eyes hardened, her voice cutting like a knife. Maybe because I'm not the one clinging to some fairy tale idea of what marriage should be, she said, her words as cold as steel. People grow up, Tom. They change. Maybe I changed, and you're just too stubborn to see it. Her words froze me in place. You think I'm clinging to a fairy tale? I said, my voice barely above a whisper. No, Amy. I thought we had a real partnership. I thought we were building a life together. But now I see. This has always been about you, hasn't it? Your needs, your freedom, your comfort. She lifted her chin, defiant, her eyes daring me to keep going. Is that so wrong, Tom? To want more than this? She gestured around the room, as if she were pointing to prison walls instead of the home we'd built together. Maybe if you weren't so obsessed with your work, so busy with everything but me, I wouldn't have had to find that more somewhere else. There it was. She finally threw it out, the blame. She was pointing the finger at my long hours, my career, as if they were an excuse for what she'd done. As if the life we'd built, the one I'd poured myself into, wasn't enough because I'd dared to focus on making it work. You're unbelievable, I said, shaking my head, a bitter laugh escaping me. I've spent years building this life for us, trying to give us everything we wanted. And now you're standing here, blaming me because you decided it wasn't enough? She didn't flinch. Her voice was sharp and unwavering. Maybe if you'd paid half the attention to me that you give to your job, we wouldn't be here right now. Her words hit like a storm, each one stirring a tempest of disbelief, anger, and a sickening sense of shame. I'd trusted her. I'd believed in her. And now I was standing face to face with the harsh reality that the woman I thought I knew was gone. Or maybe she'd never existed at all. She had been holding on to that resentment like a weapon, waiting for the perfect moment to throw it in my face. All this time, pretending everything was fine, keeping up the facade, while harboring bitterness I didn't even know existed. And now, she expected me to roll over, to accept her terms, as if I somehow owed her this twisted freedom she was demanding. So, this is who you are now? I asked quietly, my voice heavy with disbelief. A woman who feels justified in cheating, lying, and then blaming me for it all? Her expression barely shifted, a faint air of boredom flickering in her eyes. This is who I've always been, Tom. You just weren't paying attention. The weight of her words was staggering, like she had ripped open some hidden truth I'd been blind to for years. It was clear, she had no intention of looking back, no intention of fixing anything. In her mind, she was blameless, and I was the fool for not seeing it sooner. But now I saw her for exactly who she was. And in that instant I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I was done letting her set the rules. Something shifted inside me. Her cold, calculated contempt stripped away any hesitation I'd been clinging to. Whatever hope or love I had left was gone. I wasn't dealing with the woman I married anymore. This was a stranger willing to rewrite the story of our life together just to justify her own betrayal. I took a deep breath, letting the reality settle, and then looked her straight in the eye. You know what, Amy? You're right. I haven't been paying attention. But I'm paying attention now. Her eyes narrowed, her expression flickering with uncertainty. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm done pretending, I said, my voice firm and steady. Done pretending we can keep this charade going. Done pretending there's anything left to save. Annoyance flickered across her face, but she quickly masked it. Don't be so dramatic, Tom. You're angry right now, but this doesn't have to end like some cheap soap opera. We can figure this out. My way makes sense, it's practical. Practical, I repeated, letting out a hollow laugh. The only thing practical here is realizing you've been lying to me for months, maybe years, and you never planned to stop. You want freedom, Amy? Fine. But it's going to come with consequences. Her confidence faltered for the first time. She straightened, her eyes narrowing. Consequences? What are you talking about? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I let my gaze wander around the room, the framed photos of us on vacations, the little souvenirs we'd collected over the years. All the things that, until tonight, I thought represented a real life together. Now they just felt hollow, like props in a play that had long since ended. Tomorrow, I said finally, my voice calm but resolute. I'll be talking to a lawyer. I'm filing for divorce. You want out of this marriage? You can have it. Shock flashed across her face. For the first time, I saw her stumble. You're actually serious? As serious as you were tonight, I replied, feeling a surge of strength with each word. You want to make this practical? Let's do just that. I'll be gone by tomorrow. And I'll make sure you get all the freedom you've been so desperate for. Her lips parted slightly, and for the first time, her indifference wavered. There was a flicker of fear in her eyes. Wait, she said, holding up a hand. Tom, let's not rush into anything. Divorce is complicated. Messy. Do you really want to throw everything away over one night? Over one mistake? Mistake? I repeated, my voice hard with disbelief. This wasn't one night, Amy. This was a choice you made, over and over. You chose to lie, to cheat, to use me as your fallback plan. So don't stand there and try to call this a mistake. Her face hardened again, the flicker of fear replaced by cold defiance. Fine, she said, her voice icy. If that's what you want, then go ahead. Be the one to throw it all away. But don't expect me to just roll over. You're not going to ruin my life because you can't handle the truth. Oh, I'm handling the truth, Amy, I said, stepping closer, letting her see the finality in my eyes. For once, I'm handling it exactly the way I should have from the start. Her mouth opened, ready to argue, but I didn't wait to hear whatever excuse she had left. I turned and headed for the door, the silence behind me louder than any word she could have said. I didn't know where I was going that night, or what was going to come next. But I knew one thing for certain, I was done. Done with her lies, done with her betrayal, and done letting her dictate the terms of my life. For the first time in what felt like years, I felt alive. I wasn't leaving because I was weak. I was leaving because I finally realized my own strength. I was leaving because I'd finally seen the truth. For the first time in a long time, I felt strong enough to walk away from it. The next morning, I woke up on my friend Mike's couch, my head still spinning from everything that had happened. I'd barely slept, replaying every word, every look on Amy's face as I told her I was done. That shock in her eyes when her carefully laid plans crumbled, that moment played on repeat in my mind. Mike hadn't asked many questions when I showed up at his door late the night before. He knew me well enough to see I needed space, but not isolation. When I walked into the kitchen, he was already up, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. He slid one across the table to me with a quiet nod. You look like you got hit by a truck, he said. Feels like it too. I took a sip, letting the bitterness wake me up, grounding me in reality. For a while, we just sat there in silence. Mike didn't push. He gave me the space to come to it in my own time. Finally, I let out a breath and started talking. I told him everything, seeing Amy at the bar, the way she reacted, the cold and calculated way she'd laid out her plan as if it were perfectly reasonable. With every word, I felt the weight lift, piece by piece. Speaking it aloud made it feel more real, like solidifying the events in my mind helped me process them. By the time I finished, Mike was leaning back in his chair, shaking his head in disbelief. Man, I don't even know what to say, he said. That's not just betrayal, that's a whole other level of cold. I nodded, my hands tightening around the mug. It's like I wasn't even a person to her. Just an asset. Something to make her life easier. Mike leaned forward, his expression sharp. So, what's the plan now? Are you really going through with the divorce? I let the thought settle deep into my bones, turning it over in my mind one more time. Yeah. I am. There's no way back from this, Mike. Even if she tried to apologize, even if she suddenly decided she wanted to fix things, I wouldn't trust her. Not after seeing how easily she lied, how little she cared. Good, he said firmly, his voice steady. You deserve better than that. Whatever you need, I've got your back, man. You're not going through this alone. His words gave me a strength I hadn't felt in a long time. For so long, I'd been internalizing everything, wondering if I'd somehow been the problem. But the more I saw the situation clearly, the more I knew this wasn't on me. This was Amy's choice. Her selfishness had destroyed what we'd built. By noon, I finally felt ready to head home and gather my things. Part of me hoped Amy wouldn't be there. I didn't want to face her again, not yet. I wanted to grab what I needed and leave without any more confrontation. But when I pulled into the driveway, her car was sitting there, just like it always was, as if nothing had changed. The moment I stepped inside, I felt her presence. The air was thick with unspoken tension. She was sitting at the kitchen table, dressed casually, like it was just another Saturday morning. But when she looked up, I saw it, something different in her expression. Vulnerability. A crack in her armor that hadn't been there last night. Tom, she said quickly, her voice softer than I'd expected. Can we talk? I didn't sit down. I stayed near the door, keeping my distance. There's nothing left to talk about, Amy. I'm here to get my things. Her face twisted, frustration flashing briefly before she tried to mask it. So that's it? You're just walking away? After everything we've been through? After everything we've been through? I shot back, my voice sharper than I intended. You mean everything I thought we'd been through? Because clearly, you've been living a completely different life than I have. She stood crossing her arms, her eyes narrowing in defiance. Look, maybe I made a mistake, but don't act like you're some saint, Tom. You've been married to your job just as much as you've been married to me. There it was. The deflection. The attempt to shift the blame. I felt the anger rise again, but I kept it steady, refusing to let her take control of the narrative. You're right, Amy. I've worked hard. I've put in long hours to make sure we had a life we could enjoy together. But I never lied to you. I never betrayed you. And I sure as hell never made you feel like you were just a placeholder while I went off looking for something better. She looked away, her lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment, I thought she might say something real, something honest. But then she let out a bitter laugh. Fine. Go, she said, her voice icy. If you want to throw this all away, be my guest. But don't come crawling back when you realize how lonely it is out there. Her words felt hollow, like she was grasping at anything to hurt me, but they only solidified my decision. I nodded, feeling a strange sense of peace wash over me. Don't worry, Amy, I said, my voice calm and certain. I won't be coming back. I turned and walked out the door, the silence behind me louder than anything else she could have said. I didn't know exactly what came next, but I knew this much: I was done. Done with her lies, done with her games, and done letting her dictate the terms of my life. For the first time, I felt free. I wasn't leaving because I was weak. I was leaving because I finally understood my own strength. Without another word, I walked down the hallway to pack my things, each step feeling lighter than the last. Packing up my life felt surreal. I moved through the bedroom we'd shared for years, picking up pieces of my life that suddenly felt disconnected from her. Every photo, every memento that had once held so much meaning now felt hollow, tainted by everything that had happened. I reached into the closet to grab my suitcase and noticed a crumpled card tucked into the back of the shelf. It was a note I'd written for her on our first anniversary, pouring my heart into every word, thinking it would be a keepsake, a promise of our future together. Now, it felt like a cruel reminder of what I'd believed in and how thoroughly she'd destroyed it. I stuffed it into the suitcase, not as a keepsake, but as a piece of closure. I didn't need reminders of what I'd lost. What I needed was to let go. As I gathered my things in the bathroom, I heard her footsteps outside the door. She hovered there for a moment before finally knocking softly. Tom, she said, her voice quieter now, less certain. Can I say something? I paused, gripping the edge of the sink to steady myself, then opened the door. I met her eyes with a firm, unflinching stare. "What is it, Amy?" She stood there, fidgeting with her hands, her usual arrogance replaced by something that almost looked like regret. I don't know what happened last night," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I guess I didn't realize what I was doing until I saw that you were really leaving. I don't know, maybe I was just trying to feel something again. Something different." Her words were vague, scattered, as if she was searching for an explanation that didn't make her sound as selfish as she'd been. But it wasn't enough. Not for me. "So what, Amy?" I said, my voice hard, the edge undeniable. "You wanted a thrill? You didn't care who got hurt along the way as long as you got to feel alive, right?" She winced but didn't look away. "It wasn't like that, Tom. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I don't know. I needed to figure out who I was outside of this marriage. I wanted to feel like I had my own life, not just this role you had me in." I let out a long, slow breath, shaking my head. "Amy, no one forced you into anything. You had every chance to talk to me, to tell me how you felt. But instead you chose to lie. To sneak around. And now you're standing here, acting like it was all inevitable, like you didn't have a choice." Her face twisted, defensiveness breaking through the fragile vulnerability she'd been trying to show. "Maybe you don't understand what it's like, Tom. To feel invisible in your own life. To wonder if anyone would even notice if you just disappeared." For a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy. But it was buried beneath the raw anger and betrayal still swirling inside me. "Amy, that's what marriage is supposed to be," I said, my voice low and steady. "You talk to each other. You work through it. You don't just decide to blow it all up because you feel restless." She crossed her arms, her gaze dropping to the floor as if she was weighing her options, trying to decide how much to reveal. I guess I just thought you'd always be there," she said softly. "That no matter what, we'd always have each other. Even if I needed something else on the side. Maybe I took that for granted." There it was. She'd taken me for granted, seen my loyalty as something permanent, unshakable. I was just a fixture in her life, someone she could treat however she wanted without ever facing the consequences. She wanted the best of both worlds, the safety of me at home and the freedom to do whatever she pleased. "Well, now you know that's not how it works," I said, each word clear and resolute. "You can't have both, Amy. You can't keep a life with me and still run off looking for freedom whenever it suits you." She nodded slowly, her face paling slightly, and for a brief moment I thought I saw real regret flicker in her eyes. "I know," she whispered. I didn't think it would come to this." I glanced around the room one last time, feeling a wave of finality wash over me. "Neither did I," I said quietly. "But here we are." Without waiting for her to respond, I turned, suitcase in hand, and walked past her. Each step took me further from a life I'd once cherished and a woman I'd once trusted. I didn't look back, I didn't need to. This chapter was closing, and I was ready to move on. As I stepped outside, the crisp morning air hit me like a wake-up call. Everything felt brighter, sharper, as if shedding the weight of those walls had given me a newfound clarity. I loaded my things into the car, the quiet of the street amplifying every sound, the slam of the trunk, the click of the seatbelt. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, letting the reality of it all sink in. This was it, the end of everything I'd known for years. But, at the same time, the beginning of something new. Just as I turned the key in the ignition, a movement caught my eye from the corner of the driveway. Amy had come outside, standing on the porch in her robe, watching me. For a split second, something stirred, a flicker of a memory, maybe, from better days when none of this had seemed possible. She looked vulnerable, her arms wrapped tightly around herself as if trying to hold on to something that had already slipped through her fingers. I rolled down the window, half expecting her to say something, to stop me, to apologize, to make one last effort to bridge the chasm she'd created. But she didn't. She just stood there, her expression distant, her mouth opening slightly as if to speak, then closing again. I realized in that moment that whatever fight she might have had, whatever part of her might have once cared enough to try, was gone. It had vanished somewhere between her lies and her calculated attempts to justify them. "Take care of yourself, Amy," I said, breaking the silence. She nodded, her gaze dropping to the ground, her expression unreadable. I thought I'd feel satisfaction seeing her regret, some vindication watching her realize what she'd thrown away. But I didn't. Standing there with her hollow expression and her half-hearted attempt to reach out, all I felt was a strange, quiet sense of closure. As I drove away, the house grew smaller in my rearview mirror, shrinking into the distance along with the life I'd thought I'd be holding on to forever. The memories, the plans, the trust we'd built, they all felt like shadows now, remnants of a story that no longer belonged to me. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be lawyers, paperwork, and the long, tedious process of disentangling our lives. But for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a spark of something new. Hope. A sense of possibility beyond the mess, beyond her betrayal. It wasn't overwhelming, just a faint flicker, but it was there. The rest of the drive was quiet, but the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt freeing. A strange peace settled over me, a quiet acceptance that no matter how painful this was, I was free from her lies, her manipulations, and her selfish version of love. Free to rebuild, to decide what I wanted for myself without compromising for someone who couldn't even respect me enough to be honest. By the time I pulled into Mike's driveway, that small spark of hope had grown into something stronger, something real. I parked, took a deep breath, and walked to his door, ready to face whatever came next. Mike must have been watching for me because he opened the door before I even knocked. He gave me a quick pat on the shoulder as I stepped inside, a quiet gesture of solidarity. There wasn't much left to say, we'd already said it all. But just standing there in the familiar comfort of his home, I felt a little more grounded. He nodded toward the guest room where he'd set up a cot and left a small stack of clean towels. "It's all yours," he said simply. "Thanks, man," I murmured, managing a small, weary smile. He clapped me on the back with a knowing nod. "Take all the time you need." Once I was alone in the small room, I sat on the edge of the cot and let out a long breath. I felt drained, physically, emotionally, but for the first time in months, my mind was clear. This place was temporary, I knew that. It wasn't an ending. It was a starting point. I stared at the phone in my hand, scrolling through messages. Missed calls from Amy filled the screen, one after another, her name flashing like a reminder of everything I was leaving behind. Each time I saw it, her voice from the night before echoed in my mind, cold, manipulative, insisting I'd regret leaving, that I'd come crawling back, lonely and desperate. But she'd underestimated me. She'd counted on the man who would bend, who would sacrifice, who would stay no matter what. That man didn't exist anymore. I wasn't coming back. I wasn't bending. Instead, I opened a text and sent a single message to my lawyer, confirming our meeting for the next day. As I set the phone down, I felt that spark of hope burn a little brighter. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain: this time, I was facing it on my own terms.